Just making sure everyone is. Okay, thank you. Just making sure everyone is muted in the boardrooms. Apologies for that. Welcome to the third masterclass on making autos attractive. If you had a privilege to attend the previous two sessions, these masterclasses, as said before, are dedicated to brand Victorious, and they are created as a platform to share knowledge and to or reveal sort of some of the open a curtain on the auto industry and reveal some of the conversations that otherwise the public might not be aware that the industry wrestles with these issues, and some of the issues are not necessarily in the public space or domain for anyone to understand and appreciate. Part of the session, as we said before, is that those that are able to attend the entire series of 4 sessions, with the last one scheduled for the 5th of September, the 100 of you will be receiving a copy of Brand's book in the driving seat, which is a lesson in leadership, which is effectively a masterclass on its own on some of the leadership challenges that a would-be entrepreneur would face in the environment that we have in the country. And so continue attending these sessions, and look forward to being one of the recipients of this particular book. That said, coming to today's session, today we'll be focusing primarily on understanding our supply chain and figuring out how you could be a supplier in this supply chain. The masterclass portion of this particular class, you'll meet Andre, who's a successful entrepreneur who achieved being a tier 1 supplier within our supply chain system at a young age, before even turning 35, so effectively in his youth age. We hope that his story will be inspiring for your own journey as participants within the value chain of auto in SA. After that, we then have a conversation around what relationship banking looks like for anyone who would be a supplier within the ecosystem. And we'll then also look into some of the developmental considerations, especially around participating in the auto supply chain in SA. And we'll have Megan give a presentation around that. That said, I hope not to waste any time. Let me just, as part of our ground rules, remind everyone that we have a Q&A section that as speakers are making their presentations, feel free to then also put your questions in the Q&A chat box, and so that those questions will then get some attention. Time allowing, we will also recognize some of you, and we will then recognize hands, and you can raise your hand to ask a question, and then we will then give you a chance to ask a question. But if time will not allow, please feel free to use the Q&A. That said, I'm going to invite my colleague Shabani, who's the Chief Project Officer at naamsa, to introduce Andre and to then have a conversation with Andre around supply chain and supply chain participation in South Africa. What are the challenges? What are the lessons? Or what are some of the levers that were made available for him that could be enabling for your own development and achievement as well? So, Shabani, please take over the call and introduce Andre, and to my directors, you can spotlight the two. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Good morning, everyone. Shivani Singh, Chief Projects Officer at naamsa. This morning, we thought we would have a conversation with a Black industrialist that has had a long history in the auto sector, someone that I've worked with for many years across many jobs. So, Andre, welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself to the colleagues, and then maybe we'll test our podcasting skills today?
Sure. Thanks, Shivani. Thanks for having me here today. Very exciting to be on this platform, just to share a few of our insights, what we've gone through as a Black supplier in the market, good and bad. And yeah, I'm also very thankful that I got my audience here, my wife sitting here listening to me as well. So that's quite good. So yeah, thank you that I can be here today. Thank you so much for that.
Amazing. So, Andre, we're going to have a conversation about a couple of things, right? We're going to talk a little bit about your personal journey, a little bit about acoustics as a background. I want you to help me debunk some localization myths that we often hear from Black suppliers. And then maybe in the end of the conversation, we'll take a little bit of a future-looking lens around your guidance for future industrialists, if that's okay. So shall we kick it off? No pressure. We've got our naamsa CEOs on the call. We've got graduate students on the call, industry stakeholders. So I think let's kick it off, right? So thank you so much for joining us. You have the esteemed privilege of being the first component supplier to join us in one of the masterclasses dedicated to Oom Brandt. So we're looking forward to picking your brain this morning. Before we get into the technical side of the conversation about localization, you've had a long career in the auto sector. You started at acoustics, you kind of stepped out and did some other things, and you kind of came back home to acoustics. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've navigated your career in the auto sector?
Yeah, sure, Shivani. I think an interesting thing to start off with is that I was born in Uitenhage, and back in the day, every second person had a City Golf, because that's where Volkswagen was. And driving to school in the mornings with my parents, you know, my dream was always to work at an automotive company. It was just a dream of mine. So when I finished school, went to go and study. When I graduated, I couldn't find a job. There wasn't anyone who wasn't willing to take me at the time. And then I worked at Game as a packer for a year, qualified, graduated. And then by chance, I saw this article in the newspaper of a black supplier that was starting up to supply various OEMs. And I went to go and apply there. And they said I can come and work for a stipend. I worked for 500 Rand a month back in 2006. I did that for a year. And then a year later, they offered me a permanent job, and the company took over by a black consortium, and it became Acoustics. And that evolved. Back then, it was actually quite funny. That company used to do RFQs on a written piece of paper to Delta and develop it in an envelope to the front desk. That's how much we've changed. Anyway, from there, I then moved to Volkswagen. I spent 4 years there. I worked at Volkswagen. That was an amazing experience for me. I worked in purchasing. That gave me really good insight into how the OEMs did things, how they viewed things, and how you as a supplier actually need to tackle certain things, because sometimes we have our own approach, but it doesn't fit the mold of the OEM. It needs to work together. And that gave me that good insight. VW, they sent me overseas. I spent 3 to 4 months there. I was part of the localization team for the 270 project, which was the current Polo project, that we could localize that. And then I came back to South Africa from that trip, spent a few months back at VW. And then I got a job offer from an American-based company called Federal Mogul. And there I was in charge, or looked after, business development and aftermarket, which is also a very interesting part of the automotive sector, aftermarket, because there's so many different views, parts in the market that aren't authentic always, that flow into the market. How do you combat that as an original supplier? Different customer base. And I spent 2 to 3 years there. And then after that, I got a call to come back to acoustics. So yes, they developed me. They allowed me to go out. They also paid for my MBA in the end in full to complete that. And now it's just a case of giving back. I eventually became a shareholder in the company and a director. And yeah, here we are today. My story is that anything is possible, that even though you don't find a job after graduating, you can do the small things and eventually you can get into the big things. Anything is possible in the auto sector. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll come back to this topic around your personal perseverance and your commitment, because I think it's something that's quite important. But maybe for those on the call, I mean, I've walked around your factory many a times. I know exactly what acoustics does. Maybe for those that are not familiar, can you tell us a little bit about what a tier 1 supplier is? And for the non-engineers, in simple English, can you tell us what it is that acoustics makes and where does it go in a car?
Yeah, so a tier 1 supplier is a supplier that supplies directly into the lines of the OEMs. So your part is manufactured, comes off the line, and you supply it via milk run or just supply it directly to the OEM's lines, automotive or original equipment manufacturers' lines. There's no in between. So at Acoustics, that is what we are. So we have 4 sections in our factory at the moment. So our factory houses 4 different divisions, different dance numbers, different company registration numbers, just housed under one so we can share costs accordingly. So the one company that we have is called Acoustics Insulation, which does all your sound deadening parts. This is really a bitumen-based part that fuses onto the vehicle. And what it allows for is that sound is deadened in the vehicle. This part actually gets applied onto the vehicle in the paint shop. You never see it in the vehicle ever. We're the only supplier of this product in South Africa. Our biggest competitor is, of course, imports. And we supply this to all the OEMs in South Africa at the moment, except Mercedes-Benz, where we have a small quantity that we supply, but it's not as large as the rest of the OEMs. That's the one side of the business. On the other side, it's a company called Acoustics Trim. That's where I started in 2006. It was amalgamated with the group that we're in at the moment. And this company supplies all soft trim products. We supply floor carpets, parcel shelves in the back of the Polo as an example, boot mats, boot sideliners. So all the parts that you can touch and feel in the vehicle, this company is able to do. And that's the one line that we do there. There's another company called VPS, which is Vehicle Protection Services, and they supply export covers for vehicles that are leaving the country. You'll see those white covers that are on the vehicle. And they also do seat covering, which is the anti-static seat covering. So when the workers on the line are working in the vehicle, it doesn't dirty the seat. It also acts as an anti-static. And then the last company we have is a company called BlueTech. And what they do is they do laminations. So this isn't automotive at all. This is it was a task of ours to move to something completely non-automotive to diversify our portfolio. And what we do here is we laminate medical gowns, which is laminated to a membrane, which allows sweat to escape, but it doesn't allow blood to enter when the surgeons are working there. And this is exported around the world to Italy, France, some to America. So that's just how we've diversified our portfolio under one roof here.
Perfect. I think a little bit later we'll have a conversation about the importance of diversifying your product offering because there's some dynamics. But I want to talk a little bit about SAM 2035. I think everyone is aware that it has clear objectives around increasing the sourcing of products and value addition from Black-owned suppliers. I mean, I've been in the sector a while. I've worked with many component suppliers. You are one of a handful of Black-owned suppliers that are supplying at the highest level. You supply all OEMs, you're a tier 1, you have every quality certification standards that you have. What do you think your secret recipe is? What is it that puts Acoustics in this little bit of an elite club with these Black-owned suppliers?
Yeah, I think, Shivani, you see, being a Black supplier, there's the secret recipe really is that you can't have the mentality that because you're a Black supplier, you can stand hands open and expect work. It doesn't happen like that. The biggest mistake that we've made as Black suppliers is to put the Black card first and that everything follow behind that. The key recipe or secret here is make sure that you are your best at quality, your price is competitive, your logistics supply chain is full, and then as an added benefit, you are a Black supplier. I think that really is the secret to all of this because, and the reason why I say that is because OEMs also have their own KPIs. They need to be cost competitive. They need to put a product in the vehicle that is of the right quality. And what we also need to learn is as Black suppliers, we in the end also buy those cars. Because if our price is expensive or our quality is bad, we suffer as a consumer in the end. And what we also need to realize is that at the end of the day, OEM X in the local market is also competing against OEM X in the European market for the same product. And that really, it can steal volume for us. So the biggest thing really is to get your business to such a level where it's actually world-class. But in the same breath, we also need to acknowledge as Black suppliers, it isn't as easy as companies that have been in the industry for many years. We do not have the rainy day fund. We do not have the working capital requirements or we do not always have the ability to sweat the machines the same way that the historical big supplier names has. And new projects always require reinvestment, which always means that you are in this loop continuously. So the secret really is to compete with the big guys. You need to be at their level. The defining factor is that you are black.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you know, they have this saying, my mom loves to tell me this all the time, that it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
And sort of from my experience of working in the Black Supplier Development Localization case, I think it's the same. It takes an ecosystem of support to build a successful Black supplier. I know Megan King will join us a little bit later to tell us about her cluster development initiatives. But one thing that stood out for me in all my years of working with you is just your sheer enthusiasm to participate in anything that we've packaged and presented to you. No matter how weird and wonderful, I mean, some things have failed, some things have stuck. Can you tell us a little bit about why Acoustics has taken this strategic approach of leveraging multiple streams of support? We know you've received some private sector funding, public sector funding, you've participated in industry upgrading. Why have you taken the gamble to participate in that way?
Because I think the biggest lesson, Shivani, and we've been through some difficult times as a Black supplier. We've been hit hard. COVID hit us hard. After that, there was the floods in Durban. Then it was the semiconductor issue. And now we're facing logistics issues at the port again. So we've been hit from every angle. And it's out of this that you actually learn the most. And I think the realization is when you are a supplier like ourselves, you actually realize how little you know. And the expertise that are sitting within the supplier base as your peers, at the OEM levels, and also instruments that government supports you with, it's only from that you can actually progress. So we've had support from OEMs. They've done Kaizen training with us. We've got support from industry bodies such as NARCAM, through ASCII. There's been ECAF. And then also we've got funding support from the AITF. And all of this put together, it really helps you to grow because you simply can't just rely on internal resources. We just don't know everything. And what those programs have allowed us to do is to make us realize that just because a certain behavior was good for a previous model doesn't make it good for a new model. We need to consistently change. And the interesting thing for us is what we've realized is that, you know, Nokia, as an example, they were lumberjacks before, and then they became cell phone specialists. And the same exists for us with the instruments that's available in the market. When an OEM says, here is this available, this is this certain type of training available on OEE, take it and never hit it away, because there is an avenue that you can integrate it into your business eventually. It's so important to tap into those resources.
Absolutely. So maybe let's change gears a little bit. Let's forgive the pun there, but we'll do a little bit of a role play, right? So I am going to be an emerging Black supplier. Let's say I have a desire to make brake pads, okay? I'm going to read you some statements that I've heard from emerging Black suppliers, and I want you to tell me true or false and kind of what your approach is, right? So the first one, I can only enter the sector as a tier 1 supplier. I only want to supply OEMs. I think this is the only way I can make money.
Okay, that is false. The biggest lessons that we have learned is you have to crawl first before you can walk. Okay, working with the OEMs is an onerous requirement. And the reason why I say this is, and this, if you want to play in that space, be ready for what's going to come your way. And I tell you why. Every single OEM has its own set of specifications. Every single OEM has its own set of quality requirements, and every OEM has its own way of doing things. So we supply a sound deadener pad, which really is a pad to dampen sound in your vehicle. But every single OEM has a different specification of doing that. And we need to have people to support that requirement. And the reason why I say this is because supplying tier 1 is expensive. You need to have quality certification every year. There's a standard of person you need in your organization that doesn't come cheap, because the OEMs think differently. They want you to be on top of your game. As an example, OEMs no longer, if you have a problem with your part, they no longer want you to test the part at a lab that's in Europe or somewhere in South Africa. They want you to test the product in-house so you have an immediate result. That's what happens when you're a tier 1 supplier. My advice to black suppliers would be start further down in the tier. Start at a tier 3 level, then move to a tier 2 where the requirements are a lot less onerous, and then eventually move to a tier 1 when you have all your structures in place, because OEMs also support and give support down the chain as well. But the direct contact is a bit limited, and that is also a way that you can make money, starting lower down and then working your way up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important because, I mean, the kind of components you're making, they are safety critical. Lives are on the line, right? It's not
Yes.
like, you're sewing a shirt, and if the buttonhole is fractionally big, your customer may accept it. I mean, the tolerances are so low. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. It may be something, like a loose lay mat. You may not think it's safety critical, but it's got to be fire retardant and have all these other properties. And I think lower down the supply chain, you tend to have a little bit of protection in that
Correct.
space because the tier
Correct.
1 takes
Correct.
responsibility.
It allows you to grow and become accustomed to the industry before going direct.
Yeah, so it's exactly, it's crawling before you walk. Okay, statement 2. I've read in the newspaper, OEM ABC has just announced a new model or a new derivative. I think I can get some AITF or BIS funding and start supplying them immediately.
Yeah. So the way that AITF funding works is we had a sponsor that backed us. So a OEM needs to take you to the fund. They need to walk you there, if I can put it in that terms. It just doesn't work the other way around. There are instruments that do support when you get new work on a new model. But the biggest caution that I can give you is to make sure that your financial requirement milestones are the same as the vehicle launching milestones of the OEM. Because the biggest mistake that we also made as a black supplier was that we never catered for the development cost, which is involved in starting a new model or supplying a new product. And a lot of institutions, specifically banks, don't often want to fund development costs because it's an intangible. There's no security on development costs at all. But the biggest thing is these instruments are available to you. It also depends on what your ability is to pay back the product. It's pointless to get a small little component, then approach the AITF or the black industrialist, but the payback just doesn't make sense at all. It's all business case driven. And again, I want to say is that it's all about price competitiveness and not focusing all your eggs in one basket with one OEM. It's maybe doing a collective and then presenting that case to government, and they can bring it forward to you in this way. What I found is with AITF and BIS, because they are black funds, they are a lot more sympathetic to hiccups in the road, whereas your commercial bank might not often have the same understanding as that. But the black funds, they are there to develop with the supplier. They are a lot more lenient in the way that they do things. And also, it's important to them to actually see the purpose of the fund or the mandate of the fund is actually to develop more black suppliers, and they actually walk that road with you. And that's really assisted us too.
Yeah, I think it's about balancing your requirements, right? Because the commercial dynamics are very tight. I think a lot of people are not aware that your OEM customer expects you to offer a price reduction on your component over time, whereas in other sectors you're getting an inflation plus. So I think the need to balance these finance requirements is quite important. And our speaker a little bit later from ABSA is maybe going to help us unpack that a little bit. But let's go back to debunking some myths, right? I believe I can design a product that is better objectively, in my opinion, than what is currently being supplied to the OEM. I can just start supplying the OEM with my better spec. Can you explain to us why that may not be the case?
Yeah. So that statement's actually very important. I'll tell you why. In South Africa, we are, in a lot of cases, the market or the product range that we are in is a build-to-print product, which means that the OEM already has designed the product, and all that we do is we manufacture to that specific specification. I had a discussion with a European supplier recently, and their discussion was, I said, there is this part, this technology isn't available in South Africa, and we have turned the RFQ down. Their approach to us was, why don't you offer the OEM solutions then? And that is something that we haven't thought about previously. We just say, okay, this is the part, we can't make it. Instead of offering the OEMs a certain solution and say, we can give you the same specification, just in a different way of doing it. And a lot of the times, the OEMs would accept this, but you already need to be an approved automotive supplier. It's almost like applying for a job. You're coming out of university, but they're saying that you need experience first. The OEMs, the way that they work is you actually need a portfolio of evidence before you can supply anything to them. So it's not just a case of, yes, I can make a product that's better than this. They want to approve your site first. You need to have it quality approved by an industry body of your choice that's available. And you actually need to have equipment that can run the part in your plant. So you need to take that risk before you can actually get in. So it's not as the barriers to entry in the automotive market, it's very high. And that's why it's recommended, even if you have a better product, start lower down the chain and supply through.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, it sounds glamorous to be a tier one, but I mean, I've worked with you for many years.
Yeah.
I think the depth of planning and organization that is expected when you're supplying on a just-in-time basis, it's extensive. And I mean,
Yeah.
you've met them along with me, we've seen very competent industrialists coming out of other sectors, mining, rail, aviation, and they've really struggled to make this pivot because the performance and delivery requirements are just so high in the auto sector.
Yeah. No, exactly that. And you can see that, Shivani, in the way that the OEMs are running the projects with new vehicle introductions. If there's a new part, the skill level that you have, it's in the past. I'll give you an example. When I started working there, they would say, okay, the production manager can run this new product and run the project for you, because it was easier back then to do that. Now, for projects that you have, you need a specialized project manager to run those parts. You need proper labs. And this is why I just highlighted earlier, we need to be cognizant of the development costs and costs that you don't see in the background that is running in your business as a black supplier, because that can run away from you. It's so important to recognize this and the people requirement at that.
Absolutely. So maybe, Andre, let's shift gears a little bit to sort of talking to our prospective future industrialists on the call here. So, I mean, you've walked this journey for quite some time. You've participated in the value chain in a number of different levels. You mentioned earlier kind of the importance of having a wide multiple customer base, but you also explained a little bit earlier about your medical products that you make, the importance of operating your business across other sectors. I mean, our program director here loves my famous example of, we've built a supplier that used to make bra underwires, now supplies braking components. I mean, that's their business, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of this multi-sector, multi-customer business approach? And can it help you save for that rainy day you mentioned earlier? Is it a viable risk mitigation strategy in your view?
Yeah, I think, Shivani, a lot of things work together in order to achieve that. I just want to say at Acoustics, again, we were hit hard in terms of, we had to do things differently, because we had an OEM, which was really 65 to 70% of our business at one stage. And they are a big OEM supplier, or that we've supplied to. And when this OEM went through short time, it immediately put us on the back foot. And it was at that point where we tried to look at how we're going to diversify our footprint in what other markets that we can actually tap into. On the sound deadening side, we weren't a supplier of choice to all the OEMs in South Africa. Some were importing, some were trying a new technology where they spray on. And we then had an active group of team members going to these OEMs and saying how we can actually diversify our own wagon wheel inside our sales wagon wheel, but also how it is beneficial to them to have our product or their imported product local rather than having to import it. And that is just, it helps spread the risk for us. But just remember, with growth also comes its own risks. And the biggest risk that we saw is that we were so eager to actually secure our business and to diversify it, we actually grew too fast. And what happened there is we created a cash flow gap in our company, which caused other issues further down the line for us. And in part, we are still seeing these ripple effects in our company because we grew too fast at that time. Diversifying into other markets, I think it's very key. And let me just go back to the sound deadening. The other reason why we diversified in the sound deadening was when we heard that South Africa has got an active plan to move towards electrification of vehicles. Our first shock was at Acoustics Insulation that this is going to be a sunset business for us, because with electric vehicles, the sound disappears. There's no more need for noise or noise dampening. And we got worried by this, and we started moving into other products, started quoting on other products to see how we could actually lessen this. Fortunately, what we've seen now in development talks and launching new vehicles now, even though that the engine noise is gone, there's noises in other parts of the vehicle now. And that has supported us. But diversifying further into other products such as medical, that was really to balance out COVID, to be as an example. We had no automotive income. It was that specific company that got us through, because during COVID, the requirement for medical gowns was massive. And we really leveraged off that in our rainy day at that time to get us through that difficult period. Of course, the financial institutions supported us as well. Banks offered COVID loans, bridging facilities, and all of that. But the main contributor to that was because we actually started to realize that just because you're an automotive supplier doesn't only mean that that has to be your only focus. The other thing that we changed is that we moved into a different type of product. So we started to diversify into plastics as well. Plastics will always be there. It's a market that is, yes, it's largely tapped already, but it's something that is different to our current portfolio. And we've noticed now that has slowly started to develop. We've got a few new projects, and it's really going to make us sustainable beyond the current vehicle lives that we currently in. So I would definitely recommend that diversify, because even though you've got a contract for the current vehicle, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have that same contract for the next vehicle as well.
Yeah, Andre, I think that your comment about the NEV transition is an important one. I think, you've said in many of these meetings, is the supply base ready? Can we supply on these NEV builds? And a lot of that conversation is usually focused on battery systems, right? And I don't think a lot of people understand the applications. Plastics, we see increasing utilization of that in vehicles going forward. Obviously, the specifications are different, but it's kind of a future-proof sector. So I think that's quite important. Let's move on a little bit, right? So I know I must be careful because I know your wife is listening. So I know your number one passion is your wife and your family. Yes. Maybe followed too by the Springboks. You're probably the most ardent Springbok supporter I've ever met. But I would safely say the auto sector is probably your third one. You've achieved so much in a relatively short period of time. Right? People have spent 50, 60 years building businesses to the scale that you have. You've done it in a lot shorter time. In the interest of this being a masterclass and maybe saving some school fees for other people, what would your single biggest do-over be? What is your experience being? What would you never do again? And how would you do it differently if you had another opportunity?
I think I would debunk the thought that you can't have how can I put it this way? The OEM is not the enemy. Okay? Sometimes in the supplier base, you think that they are so difficult to work with and that you need to hide certain things from them. Okay. I would do things completely differently and rather look at, and I know we always say that they are in partnership with us, but sometimes as a supplier base, we don't necessarily act in that way. As an example, if we have a raw material issue, We try and solve it ourselves. We don't tell the OEM. And at the last minute, when we realize we can't solve it, we tell them and it's too late. Rather be upfront and say that this is a massive issue for us. We can't solve it. The OEMs, with the amount of muscle that they have, 9 out of 10 times they can solve it for you. And that just allows everyone to work together because it continues the line to move forward and that there's no line stoppages at all. So the biggest change that I would make as a black supplier would be that if you have a problem, don't try and solve it yourself. There's so many people out there that can actually support you. And yes, some of the OEMs approach is to hit you with a big stick eventually, but at the end of the day, they still help you. They're there to support you because if they solve the problem for you, everyone wins. The second one, Shivani, that I would definitely promote to black suppliers is that make sure that your working capital is sufficient for your business. Because just because you're selling the part doesn't mean you're getting paid today. Sometimes you're out of pocket for 30 to 45 days. And if that isn't catered for, you are immediately on the back foot. You just can't get out of that and your company will stumble along. Even though your income statement says you're profitable, your cash flow statement is always in the negative. And I would definitely urge everyone to please focus on that to make sure that the funding part of your business is in place. The last thing that I would change, I always say this, and I'm glad you mentioned the Springboks. You can't win a World Cup with the B team. It just doesn't work that way. You need to have the best people at your disposal in your company if you want to be a tier one and if you want to be an impactful supplier in the automotive industry. You just can't do that. And if you don't have those good people, you might decide to get a cheaper person because they can do the job. It just becomes more expensive in the end. And for me, having the right people on the bus is a key lesson for us in how we've grown people. People in different industries come with different skill sets, and they just make you see things differently. And that's also really pushed us. And I'll talk about the woman aspect a bit later as well. It really just pushed us to a next level. And that's really how I would have changed things if I could do things all over. It's focus on the customer, the financial requirement, and then getting the right people on the bus at the very beginning.
Absolutely. So I think our listeners online, you might have saved them half an MBA there. So thank you for that. But maybe let's wrap it up on the woman topic, because you know that's something I'm passionate about. Women in the auto sector are few and far between. And I think, it's important to let everyone know that whenever I have visited your plant and walked around on the shop floor, I have always seen young women of color in the engineering department leading and driving projects. I mean, it always warms my heart to see them, being very strategic and leading from the front lines and getting you the outcomes that you want. And I mean, they are doing very technical work. And a lot of the times you see women in autos are sitting in the back office in marketing and in finance. It's quite rare to see that on the shop floor. So for me, I mean, my observation is that diversity and inclusion is at the top of mind of the acoustics shareholders and the leadership. Can you tell us a little bit about why you've taken that approach and sort of what have been some of your lessons from giving these young women a chance and a platform to perform in your business?
Yeah. So my perfect scenario, and this is just a personal scenario, my perfect scenario would be on a management team to have a 50-50 split between men and women. I tell you why. It's the meetings that I was involved in as a younger person. And I'd always look at these men. It's always at that time who was right. Okay. And then a solution would be come and agreed upon, but at the next meeting, nothing is done. Okay. Then we employed this very powerful lady. She was on our management team. She was heading up quality. And this lady didn't say much in the meeting. And then when she came back, everything was done. And I just found that balance between men and women, it just worked perfectly because 9 times out of 10, the ladies would see that things got done. Okay. And this is not an advert because it's Women's Month. I'm being serious in my experience, Shivani. Concerning the engineers that we employed, for us, it was important to develop Black ladies in the automotive industry because we noticed that there was a gap. Before, where I was in companies originally, you would probably find that because there was this perception that it's a lady and this is a man's industry, women weren't often given the opportunity to excel. But once we had them enter into our company and in our projects department, it was a completely different view. It was a completely different way of doing things. The way they dealt with the workers on the floor, the way that they engage people, it's a completely different aspect on a way that males would do things. And I just thought that when we look in our project department, and we had two ladies working in there, and they've moved on since to more senior positions in different companies. And that was the view that we were taking, that coming to our company, we'll give you a launching pad to build up your CV. And if you leave, you know that you've learned here and this was your sounding board. And we found that in the projects department, that the way that the men and the ladies engaged, the way that they viewed things differently, just made the impact and the outcome of certain decisions so much better because it was so diverse, Shivani. And we are constantly in contact with NMU to see what lady engineers are available. We had one recently as well. She worked on a 6-month contract and she's left to Spain. The impact is absolutely amazing. I must also say, it still exists that people are shocked when they see a lady talking about tools or process or quality. And it's something that we need to change in the automotive industry still. I mean, we can see one of our OEMs have changed that. The MD is a lady as well. And that is a great motivator for everyone. We also in our company are trying to push ladies through our ranks because you must have the mindset that even though you are developing them, you can't cage them in your company. They need to leave. And we've really tried to develop a culture of incubation at our company for ladies, that they can start and they can spread their wings, because in the automotive industry, essentially, ladies are going to be leaders eventually. And they are leaders already, we can see that. And that's really the focus that we've had at Acoustics, was really to do that from an incubation and development role. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible, Andre. I think that was a good spot for us to end Women's Month on a high note. So thank you very much for that. Thank you so much for joining us, for being so open and so honest about sharing your story with us. I know many people on the call are going to have questions for you. We'll come back to that a little bit later. So colleagues, if you want to dump your questions for Andre in the chat box, no bones spared, ask away. He's going to get back to us. Andre, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Shivani.
You're very welcome. Mr. Program Director, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. That was so insightful, by the way. My note taking is up to like 7th page. All the more reasons why we should take off next time I'm in town, Andre. So we're gonna move and keep quoting my own CEO saying we're gonna move into another gear. We're going to invite Dr. Kanaleto Twale, who is the head of enterprise development at ABSA, to just come and give sort of a lens of a bank when they have a relationship with someone like an Andre trying to break into a supply chain as sophisticated as the auto supply chain, and sort of some of the banking tools and levers that are available for would-be entrepreneurs. And we will also share from his own portfolio some of his own contacts, so that he could also share with you how to help you if you are a would-be supplier. And remember again to continue sharing your questions on the question box, and thanks for those that we've received to date. So Tate, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ndadidi Teko, and welcome to everybody. And I'm looking forward to a good engagement. I'm trying to get this on presentation mode, but yeah, I think there's a bit of a challenge, but I'm going to go straight into it. I'm not sure whether you are able to see it as presentation mode. If you can just let me know.
I can confirm that you are on presentation mode at the time.
Okay, Great stuff. So as ABSA, I mean, we are very much in support of the automotive industry, and in particular from an enterprise development view, the transformation of the industry. And we are realizing that it's going to be and has been quite a significant journey to try and make sure that our offerings are actually relevant to budding entrepreneurs as well as those who are already on their way to become, first-tier automotive suppliers. So we also have quite a significant partnership with two specialist entities that actually focus on granting or providing access to grants and other non-debt support. For example, I know that we had a chat earlier around the support for R&D and innovation. So through our strategic partnerships with these specialist entities, we're actually able to offer the support that can differentiate the OEM suppliers from an innovation point of view. I'm not sure whether everybody's aware, but there's around 32 billion in incentives that are offered by the DTIC. And the biggest challenge has always been getting to have our beneficiaries to get access. So by having these specialist service providers, they actually assist us in obtaining this particular support or grant that are able to actually get the OEM or the budding OEM supplier onto the right footing. So for example, from an R&D point of view, there are tax incentives that are able to ensure that there's continuous development of products to ensure that they meet the standards of the OEMs. And then obviously there's also cash grants from an R&D point of view that also assist in making sure that we have cutting edge technology for our suppliers. And of course, there's also a funding element to that. And I think that is something that will add value to whether it is established, OEM service providers or suppliers, or ones that will branch out into an area that they've identified has got a demand. And then when you come to our financial support, I think the most important thing is to ensure that our suppliers are actually investment ready in terms of the decision. So, what is the right level of plan to be able to acquire at this stage, depending on what their contract is. And then when you look at capital investment, there's an element, of course, that's asset finance, but the other element might not necessarily be asset finance. So we've also got guarantee solutions. We are the biggest consumer in terms of the South African guarantee systems that are offered by the DTIC. And then from a capital investment point of view, a lot of the suppliers also have supply development funding that they can also deploy. And because of our intense knowledge in dealing with corporates and OEMs, we are actually able to take the supplier or the supplier onto this journey and actually support them in terms of getting the right financial support. We also know that infrastructure is important, and we are able to tap into the likes of the critical infrastructure projects. And this does alleviate the requirements from an own contribution. So for those individuals who are not second generation inheritors, we are able to definitely find this as a value add. And then, of course, there's a big focus on alternative energy from an ABSA point of view. So we are part of the bounce back scheme, but we are also having specific incentives that we provided through our Treasury Department that allows us to actually provide subsidized funding for alternative energy. And in the past couple of weeks, we've actually renegotiated our contract with the BIS We've gone to the extent that we've taken our chief credit officer to actually understand what are the new developments within the BIS. And we are very, very encouraged by the reception that we've got, and they are a key partner for us in terms of ensuring that we've got the right level of support from a funding point of view, and it is blended so that when the economy turns in an adverse direction, we're not sitting with highly geared beneficiaries. And then development finance raising. So we've got partnerships with most of the DFIs, and we collaborate in terms of the funding, which I think is a positive step. They are not competitors. Their mandate is developmental. And from our point of view, we are commercial, but we also are able to put on the developmental hat. And then, of course, the most important thing is a lot of our beneficiaries would not necessarily have, the balance sheet. So the business case built on a proper cash flow modeling, detailed in terms of what the requirements are for the particular applicant, is something that we use external service providers that are actually experts in this particular field, and that has given us a good base for us to have sustainable structuring in our funding options. And then when I look at the support that we provide to suppliers to the OEM, as I've mentioned, the specialist cash flow based lending, and this is an area that even our credit department is familiar with. So when we put this proposal together, they were quite involved in this, and it's something that we believe can add tremendous value. So, like I indicated, high gearing is not desirable in this space. So we have the blended finance capability, whether it is with BIS, and also we have clients that are actually private equity investors, and they are keen to get involved in the automotive trade because of its sustainability and durability within the South African context. And most of the models that we actually produce are export lines for right-hand, country. So that provides us with an element of, sustainability. And then the most important thing is that we don't leave the suppliers on their own. So we provide post-investment monitoring and support. It is a proactive capability that we've got. So they're able to pick up from the account conduct much earlier that there would be challenges, and they're able to actually advert these, whether it is engaging the OEMs to understand if there's going to be delay in terms of the payment terms or whatever the challenge is. It might be with the supplier, or it might also be with the off-taker. And then, of course, it is important for all our beneficiaries to keep up-to-date financial records so that they are always ready in case they need emergency funding. So this we provide through our enterprise development, business development support. So across the major sectors where we have OEMs, we've got specialist accountants that we've onboarded that can actually support the beneficiaries to make sure that their financial statements are always in a ready state, whether it's management accounts or yearly financial statements. And this does actually make it easier for us to consider funding and to be able to advance that funding. And then most importantly, we've got senior ED sector specialists in key OEM regions. So that would be Durban, in Natal, the Eastern Cape, both in East London as well as Nelson Mandela Bay. And this adds particular value to the bankers because it allows us to bring in the ED knowledge and also the relationship that we've got with the OEMs into the discussion, and it's actually a better outcome. So there's a higher approval rate, there's a better understanding of the position of the supplier, and this actually leads us to become quite prolific in terms of the learning that we are able to do. And then, of course, there's also the reality that, existing suppliers have to be brought in. So we do collaborate with existing suppliers. We look at things like the mentoring and skills transfer. we call that capacity acceleration, because there might be those existing untransformed suppliers who have a vision to actually, be empowered. They might not have succession within their own family, so it makes sense that they might get, external party who will be able to add value and keep the legacy of that business alive. And then, of course, for those entities that want to get a Black investor on board, we've got various options from an empowerment finance for Black equity buyers. So whether it is our partnership with the DTIC from an incentive program, or through a private equity investors that were actually part of the ABSA financial intermediary support programs over the past 3 years. So this does give options for funding for those suppliers that don't necessarily have the means on the balance sheet to support that. And there's obviously, with private equity, there will always be an exit clause, and this allows us to still have those if you say either the private equity can still maintain as part of the financing structure, and at a later stage when the supplier has got sufficient capital and a balance sheet, they can look at exiting both from the private equity as well as maybe the existing or the previously unempowered supplier. So there's various options there. And then, of course, we ensure that our documentation and advice to these new partners is a sustainable one. So we make sure that the shareholders' agreements are in place, and all necessary documents related to any IP that will make any seamless transfer. If the current supplier or the unempowered supplier decides that they want to exit the relationship, we also have that option. And then, of course, in certain instances, they might want to still, continue as a minority shareholder, and they can offer continued participation and guidance to our beneficiaries. That's also a win-win, because they'll always be there and use their, years, sometimes generational knowledge that they can then, provide to our new beneficiaries, and, lead to the continued, if I can say, success of that business. And we believe that these particular packages or enablers that we've got are actually tested, and they actually can make an impact from a transformation of a supplier base. And this, we believe that ABSA is leading, because we've got to understand, we've gone to great lengths to understand what are the dynamics within the environment, what are the players. And by coming up with these solutions, we believe that we'll actually be able to have a positive impact on transformation of our supplier base going forward. We also do collaborate with the AITF and RMI for their downstream opportunities. So the entire value chain is actually catered for. Thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. I will be ready to field any questions once the facilitator allows us to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. KK. Ladies and gentlemen, I think because we asked Dr. KK to leave Menko this morning to be with us, to release him early, we're not going to wait for you to pose your questions on the chat box like we normally do. So what I'll do is that I saw a hand as he was presenting as well, so there was an interest to ask him a question. So I'll take a round of questions. Indicate if you want to ask a question by raising a hand. And what we'll then do is that we'll request you to also open your mic. Maybe we'll not allow you to do your camera. And then you can ask a question so that we can allow him to rejoin his meeting this morning. And so if you're interested in asking him a question based on the presentation, my question, Dr. Quayle, as we waiting, is around the issue around industrial policy. Normally, people in auto view industrial policy as APDP, and we forget of all these other incentives that are supporting industrialization, especially those research incentives and grants, and those tax rebates, and people don't access those. And it's quite interesting that you started by reflecting on them. And then it made me think though, is how many do you wait for suppliers to say I'm interested? Or do you say, look, here's something, I can help you achieve it? How do we create both interest and take up from a banking point of view? I think that is sort of my question, because it's one thing for these incentives to be there, but if I'm not gonna come to you as a bank and say I'm interested, help me, they are there as a relic that I might not access. And so how do we then balance you telling me it's there, you can access, or me coming to you and saying, I'm interested in it, help me gain access to it? I think you sparked my mind there around those incentives in your first slide. And so write that question down as my first one. Any other question? If colleagues online, if you could raise your hand.
Let me start by answering yours, Mr. Diteko. So you would have been aware that we hold, whenever we have, let's say, naamsa events, we would the day before hold a workshop for budding entrants into the sector. Those that are already there on a small scale, we hold those workshops to ensure that they are capacitated with knowledge. And I think the last year we had over 50, close to 50 that we had. More importantly, we also do have, a relationship with RMI as well as the AITF, and we do get, those referrals. And we continue to also, in various platforms, ensure that people are aware that we are having the capability to actually assist them with those services, R&D, innovation, and making sure that they can pay for the research. At this stage, we don't publicize it from a marketing point of view, but we do have, with the AIDCs, both in the Eastern Cape and in Gauteng, we have those partnerships. So we do get regular, if I can say, referrals from them around this.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Thank
Then
you.
Andrea spoke around cash flow challenges. Now, obviously, with an innovation fund that's got a grant, that whole investment process that Andre explained, where he was speaking about how you could move from an innovation that you have, and then you then have to be able to build it in your own factory, test it in your own factory, and then only then would an OEM be able to engage you to complete a business. And it's a protracted process. It could take up to 3 years, it could take up to 7 years in between you being able to fund. And so cash flow remains a big problem and a big area where we're trying to solve problems for suppliers. So obviously, this is not banking as usual. This requires a sidestep from the usual. You need to change what you already are doing to accommodate this procurement process and its requirements. And how easy is it for banks to move from business as usual to support such a sophisticated supply chain?
I think the most important thing is we've gone to lengths to understand the various dynamics and factors that actually impede, greater participation by previously disadvantaged individuals. So just by having a process that makes it easy for our beneficiaries or beneficiaries within the value chain to access these grants and these incentives actually does fast track the process. So it should actually make it a much more quicker and more seamless process, because we have obviously engagements with the DTIC as well as with the service providers who have excellent expertise in this. And this does definitely shorten the time frame. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does. I'm just thinking that Africanicity in terms of auto could be something different. But I'm going to allow Gerard to ask a question. You can unmute, they'll unmute you, sir. Gerald, sorry, I may have pronounced it wrong. Gerald. They say you are allowed to unmute, Gerald. Okay, I guess we've got a technical problem there. Let's wait it out. But again, thank you for your presentation. I think the other question that I had as you were presenting and trying to reconcile what Andrew was speaking to and what you were discussing is the idea that is there a marketplace? And when I say marketplace, it's a BE marketplace which might not exist, where a historic supplier to the industry feels like they've run their course and they are now willing to pass the reins to a black supplier. And is that an existing marketplace? Is there a lot of people looking to dilute their equity for purposes of allowing black participation and dilute them through a BET? Is it something that we are witnessing in the marketplace? Should people be trying to access these opportunities through that particular approach?
Yeah, look, I'll be honest. Initially, there is resistance because I think most individuals who started the business are not open to dilution. You know, they see it as their baby. They've nurtured it and actually they would like to keep it as, from an ownership point of view, as closely knit as possible. And but when you take them through the process, they see that actually this is a temporary measure. So within 3 or 4 years, you can have the private equity firm actually exiting totally. So I think it's a matter of just ensuring that there's a common understanding of the role that they play. And it does actually assist from a sustainability point of view because high gearing is not sustainable by any means. And that is the one thing that we are trying to solution for, with the conscious knowledge that a lot of black participants or aspirant participants in the value chain will not necessarily have an appreciation of that process. So it's about just making sure that they understand. And once they understand, I think there's less resistance, and they understand that it's actually facilitating an opportunity to raise funds and go into production, and also then have the option of exiting at a later stage. Thank you.
So,
and
Harold's question, I have it in the box before I release you, was around the fact that he's a supplier based in PE and also your client. And he's never heard of the interventions that you mentioned, even from the AIDC, from the Eastern Cape. So perhaps it's the idea of how do you become more visible and sharing the contacts, in particular with your own division within ABSA. How do suppliers get hold of?
Yeah, thanks, Gerald, for the feedback. I think it is constructive from our point of view. So you can share my details with Gerald. I will be in the East London in early October, and I'll make sure that I'll include you, and I'll also in between, I'll also be able to refer you to the specialist in that area, the ED specialist, who can then look at your needs. Hopefully, your loyalty to us will be rewarded, albeit on a belated basis. But I do appreciate the feedback.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely share the contacts, and thanks for that input. And I still apologize whether it's African pronunciation of your name or the English one.
Gerald.
But yeah, Gerald, Gerald.
Gerald. Okay.
Gerald, okay. We go with Gerald. Thanks. Apologies for.
Thanks. I have received your email address, and I will definitely be in contact. Somebody will contact you during the course of today as well.
Thank you. So we're going to release you, and thanks for supporting this program this morning. And do pass our naamsa's apologies to your memco for having you stay with us for this past 1 hour.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and all the best for the rest of the session. And to those, entrepreneurs who ventured into this, well done. And Teta, you're quite welcome to share my email address with them, and I will do my best to assist them wherever they are based. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the masterclass.
Thank you. Thanks. Now we're going to shift gears and we're going to focus on our last presenter this morning, which is Megan King. And Megan King is with BMA, and she's going to speak around the idea of cluster development, and which effectively is how do we create an all-round fortified industrial supplier that's able to find that's able to build a sustainable manufacturing business in an environment where manufacturing is not necessarily the fastest growing segment of our economy. So let's welcome Megan, and as she then takes us through her presentation. Megan, you can take over our screen and share your presentation, and welcome once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the opportunity to chat to everyone today. Give me 1 second to share my screen. If you could just confirm you're seeing it in presentation mode.
Confirmed.
Great. All right. So good morning, everyone. It's really great to chat to you today. I think that the previous speakers have been hugely interesting, and I think lead well into what I'm going to chat to you about, which is on clustering for competitiveness. When Shivani first engaged with me about presenting at this workshop, and she said, you know, the reason why we'd like you to chat to everyone today is that we're often getting emerging and future suppliers approaching us or approaching other entities, wanting to supply into auto, but actually not being adequately tapped into the support that is available to them and available to help grow their business. So, I mean, she spoke earlier, and Andre also detailed really well that ecosystem. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes an ecosystem to build an emerging or a new entrant supplier into autos. I'm going to talk to you a bit about that ecosystem and a bit about how clustering can support particularly new entrants into autos, and create an incubation space for them to eventually supply. So, trying to click through to the next page. All right, so I'm going to start a bit about what is clustering, because I think that everybody has a bit of an understanding. I know there's a broad group on the call, as was noted by the program director up front. We have everyone from graduates to aspiring enterprises into automotive industry, and OEMs and tier 1s, 2s, and 3s. So there's a broad group. Some of you may be familiar with the term, others may not. So I'll start off with a bit about clustering, and then just a bit about my role in clustering. So I am a chief facilitator on a number of different clusters, namely the Durban Automotive Cluster, which I will speak a bit about in more detail later, the Durban Chemicals Cluster, the South African Automotive Benchmarking Club, and the East Cape Automotive Industry Forum. So what are clusters and what is clustering? So we can start with a very technical definition, which, if I read out to you, is that it is regionally specific groups of economic agents that interact in a structured and purposeful manner to create superior operational capabilities and products based on collective efficiency principles. It's a very long-winded way of basically saying that it's firms that are often located close together, working together to improve and leverage collective efficiency. So that is the cost and other benefits you get from working together to ultimately grow and develop improved operational capabilities. So there are 3 factors that you can that factor into clustering. Firstly, it's generally a geographic concentration of similar firms. So we're talking about firms within an area that are often close to one another, and therefore can work together quite easily. And the next is scale economies. So there is positive benefits derived from these firms working together. For example, they can access market amongst each other, attract skilled labor together, source suppliers, service providers, share knowledge, etc., within their area, and then joint action. So there's this active cooperation between the firms, and creating linkages and networks. But what does that actually mean in terms of a benefit for an emerging enterprise or other firms that are part of clusters? So clusters can encompass many linked industries. So as I said, at BMA, we facilitate a number of different clusters, and I'm directly involved in a number as well. They can flow horizontally and vertically. So what this means is that you can either cluster groups of similar operations. For example, you could have a tooling cluster where you're looking at, grouping together people that have a very similar operation, and, they're all tooling manufacturers and they could benefit from working together. Or they could flow vertically, which is through the supply chain. For example, you could have an OEM and their suppliers, and that would be a vertical type of supply chain cluster. And one of the key elements of clusters is that they also include governmental and other institutions. So it's not just a group of firms. It's a group of firms working with industry. It's a group of firms working with government, working with education and training providers, universities, other funders, and it creates an ecosystem within itself. So you are better able to tap into that ecosystem approach that Shivani touched on earlier today. So why do they work? Why, if you are an emerging or a new entrant into the automotive industry, why would you consider engaging with a cluster? Why would you, what benefits could you possibly get? And also, if you are a large company that's already quite established and working in the industry for some time, why would you want to engage with clusters, and why do they work? So there is a challenge and ultimately a cost of going it alone. And I think Andre touched on this extremely well up front, which is that you need to find things out for yourself. You'll be reinventing the wheels if you try to do everything by yourself. So progress will be slow. And as we know, time is money, time is cash. Slow progress is slow money in the bank. It ultimately is going to be hugely challenging for you to move forward as a business. Leaning into the cash element, the cost of implementing can be high. You may have to bear the full cost of an initiative that you want to undertake, whether that be trying to break into the auto industry, or maybe as Andre spoke earlier, maybe it's diversifying your business. But there is ultimately other tools, other support systems, other players in the ecosystem that you can tap into that are part of the cluster. You may be isolated, and that means that you don't have those support structures. And then ultimately, who's going to listen to you if you need to try and influence your external environment? If you want to make a change, if you want to engage with government on matters that are impacting your business, you going it alone is not going to help. There are there is a collective voice that can support you in this. So clustering ultimately provides that effective solution to industrial development and to supporting new entrants and existing entrants with competitiveness improvement. Firstly, it's quicker. So firms can rapidly identify common challenges, weaknesses, opportunities, pockets of best practice within a cluster. And if I think back to some of the clusters during COVID, there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of chaos. No one knew what was going on, but firms were experimenting with different things, and some people were coming out with some really good ideas on how to respond to some of the legislation. That information could be rapidly shared with other cluster members so that they didn't need to go through that learning journey from point one. They could jump in where somebody else had figured out something really good, innovative, and insightful. So you could respond to those type of challenges a lot quicker. It also makes things cheaper for firms. So a good example of that is skills development and training. If you are even a large company, often you do not have enough employees to fill a classroom. So if you want a very specific type of training and skills development, you can maybe send 1 or 2 employees. It's also very difficult to send huge amounts of people off the factory floor at one time. So you can send only small groups. As a cluster, you can fill those classrooms and have more regular training opportunities available to members, because every firm is sending 1 or 2 or 3 people. You can then get a class of 30 to 40 learners quite easily when you look at the broader group. So that reduces the cost of the training quite substantially and ultimately provides benefits to them. Your success is often linked to those within your supply chain and those around you. If you are all operating in one value chain, making sure that others operating in that value chain to the same customer are performing well ultimately has benefits to you. So you have an incentive to work together. And then, as I said, it creates that space for a collective voice, and you're able to talk and respond as an industry and as a group rather than as an isolated firm. So what is really key for clustering is that it does create these spaces for information sharing and knowledge generation. And if you look at the theory, it really does create this framework for upgrading and for improvement because of the notion of collective knowledge and collective efficiency. So if we think about a small business, a small company that is maybe interested in supplying into auto, joining into a cluster, they would be able to access a pool of information, be able to tap into what other firms are doing, what is best practice, quite easily, and fast track their development as opposed to trying to figure out all of these things themselves. So each individual firm, you can see in that little cloud diagram, has its own firm knowledge. There are things that some firms do better than other firms, and insights that they've generated. By being able to share that and share that to the broader cluster, there's this collective knowledge pool where everybody is then able to benefit and grow. And I think again, Andre tapped into that quite nicely up in the beginning of the presentation, where he said that accessing these types of resources and the knowledge that is available is really, really critical for any supplier wanting to develop. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the DAC, which is the Durban Automotive Cluster, and it's an example of clustering in the automotive industry. I'll talk a bit about some of the programs that the cluster is currently doing and the benefits that it would have to firms that need or want to tap into the type of support that a cluster could offer. So the Durban Automotive Cluster is 25 years old. It is a really great example of a public-private partnership that has been in operation for a very long time. It is a public-private partnership between eThekwini Municipality in KZN and the automotive industry in KZN. It has 77 members as of 2024, all manufacturers within the automotive space, or manufacturers looking to supply into the automotive industry and become automotive suppliers. So the core purpose of the Durban Automotive Cluster, which was founded over 2 decades ago, was to drive the competitiveness and growth of the automotive industry. It was very apparent to eThekwini Municipality at the time that the automotive industry is critical to the municipality's economy and KZN's economy, and also the South African economy, given that a large portion of the automotive industry is located in KZN. So the cluster was established as a means for eThekwini Municipality to get closer to industry, engage with industry, and support some of the initiatives that could ultimately provide benefits to other firms in the area. One of the key reasons why the municipality has continued to fund and support the cluster is that it really does create this engine where new entrants into the industry are able to benefit from, I'm referring to it as lead firms, but these are established companies within the value chain. They are key role players, tier ones, OEMs, for example. But these new entrants have huge amounts of benefit to gain from engaging with them in these clusters and facilitating and accelerating their growth. So I'll spend a little bit of time explaining some of the benefits to do that. The first is that it creates an environment for inclusive growth. So lead firms, these larger companies, more established companies, can play a significant role in the support of industry transformation. They are looking to engage with suppliers and enterprises to support them through BEE, but also to support their localization agenda. So there's an incentive for them to work with new entrants into the industry. The sustainability of the impact is also very noticeable. So in some other incubation type programs, you often see, maybe a group of firms that are incubated, they've gone through training, they've gone through mentorship, and then once that support is removed, they're not able to stand on their own 2 feet after that. And that's because they're not tapped into their customer, they're not tapped into the market. They also don't have a long-term support, whereas these clusters are in fact multi-year, long-term support programs, which provide that incubation and that level of support over a longer period, which creates more sustainable impact for the firms. The lead firms also have a vested interest in developing their supply chain. As I said, their success is dependent on the success of their suppliers. So they are incentivized to work with and to help grow and develop the new entrants in the automotive industry at large. In the DAC, it's a really great example of some of our large tier ones, our multinationals, on a monthly basis, sharing knowledge, facilitating sessions, upskilling and developing some of the other smaller players within the cluster, and done regularly and with huge amounts of benefit, which ultimately then leads to the next point, which is greater firm level competitiveness. These lead firms are serious market players, innovators, first adopters, examples of best practice. And being part of the cluster means that these smaller enterprises or new entrants into the supply chain are able to get a glimpse of what best practice looks like. What does the standard look like to supply into the automotive industry? What does world-class, when we say world-class manufacturing, what does world-class mean? They're able to get that as exposure. They're also able to establish credibility. So the networking events, the workshops, the training programs all put small businesses, new entrants, tier 2s, tier 3s in the same room together with our larger companies who are also getting benefit from the sessions. And they're able to work with and get their name out there with these larger suppliers. And then ultimately, the scale of their impact it is magnified if they're able to work with large companies, which can create large opportunities for them. So the DAC over the last 3 years has been supporting 22 small businesses. So we have, out of those 77, 22 are SME firms. And then I'll just talk to some of the recent cluster activities. And this is not by any means the totality of the programs that the Durban Automotive Cluster and other clusters offer, but it gives a snippet into some of the programs that I think align quite well with the conversation today, which is on accessing support, developing suppliers, new entrants and emerging Black suppliers in the space. So the first program that I will present to you is on the Toyota and the Durban Automotive Cluster Accelerator Program. So this program is a program for Black supplier development to find and develop Black suppliers within the automotive industry. It has been supported by Toyota, eThekwini Municipality, and the Durban Automotive Cluster. The program aims to identify and develop high potential SMEs into suppliers of lead enterprises, creating access to market for them, upgrading them to the standards required by their customers, and then support capital investment interventions. And I'm not going to go into detail of each of these steps. I'm happy to engage with anyone after this, but ultimately it goes through a process of firstly working with the lead firms, so who the customers are going to be, to understand what their requirements are of suppliers and what they're looking for, finding the right suppliers that meet those needs, and then validating their financial compliance and their ability to meet the requirements of the lead firms. So connecting these suppliers with the lead firms once we've established their credibility, helping them to develop their business case, confirming the lead firm's requirements. Once they said, okay, we're interested in supplying, what specifically needs to be done by these suppliers to unlock that opportunity, and then upgrade them in support of that commercial opportunity and take them to the point of a first order, and then ultimately close out. So the program for the DAC has been running for 2 years, in other clusters for longer, up to about 5 or 6 years. But there have been quite a few successes, and they have really shown the value of partnering smaller businesses and new and emerging enterprises with larger companies. I have an example here of some of the successes. So these are all eThekwini-based clusters that we're involved in. And you can see the number of programs that have been run in terms of the accelerator, as well as the value of sales that were generated within the first year of the program, and number of jobs that have been created from these programs. And you can see from this type of a table that it creates a huge platform for suppliers potential suppliers to tap into, and it's a great opportunity for emerging and Black suppliers to work with their potential customers and gain access into the, in this case, the automotive industry. So we have a couple of case studies. In this case, we have a supplier who was able to produce a 40% product cost saving for their suppliers. As a result of the program, they also hired 2 new employees. They have 3.3 million Rand of planned investment in machinery coming. They now also have 2 new tier 2 customers. And interestingly as well, I've highlighted at the bottom, they not only have this opportunity to supply the lead firms through the program, but we have a network of what we call SME alumni, which is the broader SME groups, other small businesses in the ecosystem, in the DAC, that have been through this program. And they also are becoming potential customers, so they can supply amongst each other, and there are opportunities to supply those SMEs from that. An example in the chemicals industry, a small company that reclaims and recycles plastic waste into everyday items was given enterprise development funding from the lead firms, in that they then repurposed shipping containers to establish these micro recycling plants. So they invested in micro recycling machinery, created mini plants within a shipping container, and have located them throughout the eThekwini region. These little micro plants collect waste and then repurpose it into virgin material, which then can also then provide input into the lead firms. It's created 450 jobs through this, and within 1 year, 1,553 tons of plastic waste was reclaimed. So touched on earlier, skills development being one of the key benefits of a cluster program. So the Durban Automotive Cluster undertakes a number of different skills programs. As I said, we're able to fill classrooms with learners from a variety of different firms, and provide on-site training for them and upskill them, and do this in a manner that is very cost effective to the members. So new entrants would also be able to get access to this training for their employees at a significantly reduced cost, and then often included in the membership fee part of the cluster. The training programs are not just training programs, they also provide competitiveness improvement opportunities for the firms. So we have examples where learners have undertaken projects through the training that have significantly reduced costs in their scope and in their sphere of influence. This is a case study of a learner that successfully managed to reduce machine idle time and costs by investigating energy consumption. In this, he proposed shutting down the furnace when it's not in use, and looked at batch brazing orders instead of keeping the furnace idle. In doing that, they have now saved 85,000 Rand monthly just from this initiative, which came up as a part of the project that they did in their training program. And then lastly, for me, this is the core of clustering, and it is the core, the heartbeat of any good cluster initiative, and that's shared learning. I've touched on it up until now, but these are really spaces where firms can engage with best practice, learn from other firms, and share knowledge in platforms which are accessible, free of judgment, and an opportunity for small and large firms to learn from one another the clusters host series of these types of initiatives. Some of them are online in a similar way that this webinar is, but others are factory tours in person. And you go and see how firms are implementing their best practice solutions. So we would identify who's doing well in a particular area and get them to share back with the broader membership group. And it is a really great opportunity for those who want to tap into getting benefits from a cluster in quite a fast and easy manner. All right, thank you very much, Program Director and everyone on the call. That is the end of my presentation.
Wow. Thank you. I'm going to ask our Spotlight guys to put you and Andre on the screen. Maybe not me. My voice will be in the background. By the way, that's an interesting presentation that you just took us through. Quite enjoyed it. I was thinking as you were presenting around how cluster development generally as well is also supported by shared infrastructure. And what is there is that the next step in your evolution also to create shared resources in terms of infrastructure usage and so that you could then create special economic zones over existing locations.
Yeah,
general marketing.
I think it's a really good point, and absolutely, I think the point of clusters being geographically located makes for that type of sharing easier. Shared infrastructure, it doesn't always have to be shared infrastructure. Sometimes it's sharing resources. We have examples where we have firms that are, maybe they're very good at quality management. They've actually deployed their quality manager to another firm, non-competitor, but within the same value chain, but non-competitor, to go and help those firms to improve. So that resource would be there for a couple of days, maybe a week, and they've then got an additional resource to try and improve. So shared infrastructure, but also shared resources as well.
Thanks. So I'm going to ask you, Andre, to switch on your camera so that they can spotlight you for the Q&A. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Megan, I'm going to use a question that was asked by a user who called Quality Manager to you instead of Andre, but it was addressed to Andre. And the question was really around, given the targets to have a percentage, I think up to 25% of the value of a vehicle being supplied by black suppliers, do you think that we are making enough strides towards that goal? And do you think that the model such as the DAC is a sort of a model that can be scaled to achieve that particular goal of growing GPA in black vehicles up to that 25% mark?
Thanks very much. I think that that a target is absolutely it's hugely important. I think we have quite a long way to go. I know that whenever we engage with our lead firms, it's one of the points that come out quite regularly is who are the next black suppliers. We go to these black supplier development days. We have supplier days from the OEM, and it's the same group. And not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but if we're going to be going to 25%, we just need more. And that is ultimately the crux of it. And I believe that a model like the one that is being done with Toyota and the DAC is one that can be scaled, because it does focus on widespread scanning to try and identify newness, new suppliers, suppliers in other value chains that could cross over. I mean, Shivani mentioned the bra wire manufacturer. It's not one of our examples, but that's the type of thing that you can look at. But you need to be able to be casting this net widely, or else we're just going to be talking amongst the same group every time.
Very good one. Andre, this one is directed at you from Paseka, and I guess it also has a curiosity about you as well, sort of laced into the question. And the question is, would you say acoustic is still an SMME, or have you fully crossed over the threshold? Are you now a generic big business? And that said as well, laced into that question is, how old are you? Are we looking at how old are you? Are we looking at
how old am I?
Yes, are you an anomaly in the system? If people don't achieve at your age what you've achieved.
My age is actually a topic I'm trying to avoid this year, because my wife has been pushing the topic, because I'm turning 40 this year.
Okay.
And I actually don't want to celebrate it, because then it becomes real, so yeah, it's a tough one for me. But to answer the question on the threshold, so previously we were we just needed to sign a affidavit for BEE, because we fell under the 50 million rand threshold. Because of the aggressive strategy that we went on, we've now had to get qualification, because we've moved beyond the 50 million threshold in 2 of the entities that fall within the group now. Obviously, with that, just to latch onto that question, comes with its own set of problems, because before you just signed the affidavit. Now you need to qualify, and that has far-reaching effects down the chain for you as a black supplier. In some areas, you actually need to spend money to get qualified.
That's an interesting one. Okay, and let's talk about a cluster initiative like yours, Megan, which is quite independent and members are sustaining it. How do you interact with developmental finance institutions? And I know that the BIS and the AHF have been the 2 that were referenced to this morning. But how does an independent unit like yours, that's member-driven, interface with, say, developmental finance like the BIS and the AITF? And is that a challenge for a private initiative such as?
Thanks very much for the question. And I think maybe just to start off, I think the core of clustering is really about collaboration, and it is about engaging with and working with the whole ecosystem of support that is out there. And if we look at for example, the DAC strategy, I mean, right on the image of our strategy, it specifically says work with the right people in the right areas to leverage what is already being done in order to scale the impact. So, for example, like the AITF, they're invited to the development days that we're doing on the accelerator. We're engaging with them and our lead firms for financing support, financing solutions for some of these firms that are a part of the program. So absolutely, it's not an organization that operates in isolation. It is one that actually encourages collaboration and pulling on resources from various different spaces. It's not, eThekwini municipality is a huge supporter of the cluster, but it doesn't have endless funds to pump into the automotive industry. It's important that we engage with all the support that is out there, and in the same way that an emerging supplier needs to do. You have to pull the resources that are available to you.
Yeah, pretty much. So, and I'm going to pose this one to both of you. You have to both answer. It's also from the same user with the username Quality Manager. So, obviously, the 2 issues here is how do we widen localization, which means how do we improve the volume of tier 1 suppliers, and that seems to be a burden on OEMs on how they are able to create a platform to grow the tier 1 supply base. And then the theory is that if that grows, then we are able to deepen it, then to create opportunities for tier 2s and tier 3s. And the question is, the impression that the user says he has is that it's not happening. And perhaps that's where the problem is that we don't have enough population of tier 1 suppliers. So therefore, we do not create enough opportunities for would-be tier 2s and tier 3s. Is that from your own point of view the challenge? Are you in agreement, or are you in disagreement, or are you partially aligned to that observation? Both of you.
Max, you want to go first, or do you want me to
You're
go
welcome
ahead?
to go, Andre. Go ahead.
Okay. My solution to that would be as follows. I think that we've left a lot of growing the black supplier base for the OEMs to push the topic. It's happening there. It's the OEM's agenda. Instead of seeing it that as a supplier, I've gotten preferential terms from the OEMs. Some OEMs have given me a grant. They've helped me with new product. How am I going to pull up a black supplier that is further down the chain, pull them up to also become a tier 1 supplier? And I really think that as a supplier base, that we can really transform the market ourselves by pulling another black-owned supplier to become a tier 1. There's also other ways of doing this, where multinationals that potentially don't have the qualification BEE scorecard, where they can give a portion of their business and give that to a black supplier so that they can be involved directly with an OEM in terms of manufacturing and supplying as well. And I think that there are these various opportunities that are available. It's what we mentioned earlier, that it's tough for someone to start as a greenfield and then become a direct supplier to tier 1. You actually need a buddy system where a supplier that's entrenched in the market already, that is a black supplier, can pick you up and nurse you through the process, and in that way build you up as a tier 1. I also want to say this isn't a putting water on a seed and tomorrow you have a plant. This is really, it's a process that is going to take a while to go. It's also what KK said earlier, that a lot of, you must remember, I've made this business and I don't want to relinquish it. And I think what a lot of black suppliers, especially ourselves, which we missed in the past, was that we forgot that 10% of 100 is better than 100% of nothing. And you really need that support and equity in your business. And I really believe that focus should really be in the supplier field to pick other suppliers up.
Everyone, your take, Max?
Yeah, I completely agree with Andre. I think that there's a lot more that we can do at the tier 1 level into the tier 2. I also think there's greater opportunities for tier 1s to work together. Sometimes, when we are engaging, we often hear, we're working, we've got our projects, we're working with suppliers, but many are doing that in isolation. And I think that can also make the process slower, because it's nobody's, core business to develop their suppliers. It is something that needs to be done, but it's not, your manufacturers at the end of the day, and that's what you're focusing on. So I think that there is definitely opportunity for more working together at that tier 1 level to bring new entrants into the value chain.
Yeah. So Kokpan is asking another question. I think it flows from what we just said now. So what is that marketplace looking like? And what would be an ideal marketplace? And by that I mean, if we move with the idea that tier 1s should have opportunities to deepen this localization effort, and that clusters like yours, Megan, should create that collaborative and shared responsibility approach towards creating this new entry environment for black suppliers. What would be an ideal marketplace look like? How would we then get this industry of ours attractive, so it would be entrepreneurs at a startup level? How would they find out about opportunities? Is it something we're solving for, to create this marketplace that would then fully publish opportunities for would be, and I'm not even Greenfield per se, but someone that can pivot from what they're doing into our industry? Is it a problem we still need to solve for? Is it something that you would have network sessions for instance, in your accelerator programs for non-participants in the industry to just have a glimpse of what's out there? And that's what I'm trying to figure out. We don't put our RFQs in a gazette and people can wait for it every Thursday to know what to supply to Auto. So is it something we figured it out? that marketplace and how it looks and how it looks. Any of you can take it. Sorry.
Yeah.
I,
Go on, Rick.
I think one of our local OEMs here in our region, they actually created a platform for emerging black suppliers to come around the table, and they almost had like I almost want to call it like a competition where these black suppliers would come, they would present their case and say this is what they currently do and this is where they want to go. And I think if more of those engagements happen, and then down the line, what would happen with these suppliers, the OEMs would say, okay, this looks very attractive to us. We will put resources in this business to support them to get to a level and almost make them like a guinea pig to say that this is what's the value add in this business right now. We're going to take them to this level so they can start supplying us directly with these products. I think the perfect marketplace is really going to be intervention from both OEM and the supplier base, but also government incentives to actually incentivize up and coming black suppliers in the market to push to that level. And I really think that a transformed marketplace is really a marketplace where we've got the black suppliers, but sometimes, it seems that black suppliers only do certain parts where the more technical, high-level parts are left for the historical suppliers. And for me, an ideal marketplace where it would be where black suppliers move from one type of part that they produce to more technical parts because they've been developed that way technologically. So I really believe that the correct ecosystem marketplace the onus is really on both the OEM black incentive funds as well as the suppliers to really promote the sector or the section of the market, I should rather say.
Thanks. Again?
Yeah, and I completely agree with Andre, and I also think that it is important that all of these initiatives support one another, showcase the opportunities. I mean, the engagement like this is really valuable to the DAC, for example, sharing the work that is done. Those that are able to then tap into that support are now made aware of that and can do so. I think that hearing Andre's description of what the marketplace could look like reflects what the DAC is trying to do in that Toyota Accelerator program, which is ultimately creating those platforms for future suppliers. And the focus is not on startups, but on what we refer to as scale-ups, because startup into auto is very, very difficult, nay, impossible. But if you are already established and supplying in another industry or operating already, you can scale up into auto. So creating that platform for scale-ups to talk to suppliers, get more tier ones involved in that discussion. We could, widen the net of potential suppliers because they could supply different parts, and ultimately scale initiatives that have been backed. And I think that the other important part of that initiative is the process of, once you have engaged with your customer, a very, very clear letter of intent from that potential customer stating, if you do X, Y, Z, you will then meet the standards that we expect. So that new entrant, that supplier knows, okay, these are my gaps. I need to do X, Y, and Z, and they can project plan, they can get the support they need to in order to close those gaps. Because often, they'll get an opportunity to engage and they will present and they'll speak to a potential customer, and then they won't hear back. And or they will and just say, sorry, you were unsuccessful. But even if they give high level, you need to do X, Y, and Z, it's not clear, robust, clear cut. I think in order to close those gaps, it needs to be very clearly documented what those gaps are, how to close them, and then support them to do that. I think that would make fast tracking them through the marketplace a lot easier.
That's incredible. I wish we had more time to take all the questions that were asked. Thank you for your input. Again, it's been a lesson for me. I remember after joining the industry, I was 2 months, if not 3 months into the industry, and I had a chance to meet Andre at another workshop in PE, and that was my introduction to localization. That 15 minutes that you presented before I spoke, and I technically changed every word you were saying. I used synonyms. Whatever you said in one word, I used another word to say the same thing. So it's always been great listening to you. And Megan, that was insightful. And I thank you both for making this particular session. It was an incredible masterclass. I think it was the best out of the three, but that's just my opinion. But remember, everyone who's joined us, thank you for joining us. Remember that if you join the next session and our system shows that you've attended all three, you will be a recipient of that book from Brand Pretorius. And we're looking forward to the 5th. On the 5th, if you're joining, we're going to be talking new technologies and innovation and how it's affected. So we're going to look at the industrial process and how that industrial process has evolved. What are new technologies in manufacturing? What are some of the skills that are required and emerging as ones that we need to create resilience around as an industry? And we're going to speak with another young CEO and have another live lesson. So thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm looking forward to you joining us again for the last session of the masterclass. And remember that look out this week for the announcement around the SA Auto Week happening in October, and looking forward to you joining us at the SA Auto Week this October. Thank you and good morning. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Bye.
Bye.